My name is Cassidy, and I'm 24 years old. The night my parents tried to trap me, I was sitting at their dining room table, fork halfway to my mouth, when my father dropped the bomb. $800 per month, he said, his voice flat and businesslike, like he was negotiating a car lease instead of talking to his daughter. My mother smiled that sweet, poisonous smile and added the kicker. Unless, of course, I wanted to help my sister Bethany with the twins. My sister smirked at me from across the table, bouncing one of her 4-month-old babies on her lap, victory already written across her face. They thought they had me cornered. They had no idea about the $42,000 I'd been hiding in my bank account for the past 6 months. Before we dive into this story, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments below. And if you've ever felt trapped by family expectations or been the black sheep who had to save themselves, go ahead and hit that like button, because you're going to want to see how this unfolds. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications because trust me, this gets wild. Now, let me take you back to how I got here. I'd been renting the basement apartment in my parents' house since I graduated from college 2 years ago. It wasn't glamorous, but it was private, cheap, and close to my accounting job downtown. The rent was $300 a month, which let me save aggressively. My plan was simple and I'd mapped it out to the smallest detail. 18 months of disciplined saving, minimal spending, packed lunches, no vacations, and I'd have enough for a down payment on my own condo. At that dinner table, I was already sitting on $42,000. Nobody in my family knew about it. I kept that information locked down tighter than nuclear codes because I knew exactly what would happen if they found out. They'd find a reason why I needed to share it, sacrifice it, or loan it to someone who'd never pay me back. My parents had always favored my sister Bethany. She was 28, 4 years older than me, and she'd been the golden child since birth. When Bethany needed college tuition, our parents paid every penny. When I needed help, they told me student loans build character. Bethany got a $15,000 wedding budget. I wasn't even asked to be a bridesmaid, because she said she had too many friends already. My birthday got forgotten last year, but we all celebrated Bethany's half-birthday with cake and presents. The pattern had been clear my entire life. I was the backup plan, never the priority. 6 months before that fateful dinner, Bethany had married Fletcher, a real estate investor who seemed wealthy with his tailored suits and talk of property deals. They bought a nice house in the suburbs and Bethany posted endless photos of their perfect life on social media. But the reality was uglier than the Instagram feed. Fletcher's business collapsed spectacularly. Bad investments, market timing, whatever the excuse was, the money vanished. They were drowning in debt by the time Bethany gave birth to twins, Grayson and Harper. When the babies were 2 months old, Bethany and Fletcher moved back into my parents' house, claiming it was temporary. My parents gave them the entire second floor, 3 full bedrooms, while I stayed in my basement studio. Bethany complained constantly about exhaustion and how hard it was managing 2 infants. My parents nodded sympathetically and started looking at me like I was the solution to a problem I didn't create. The ultimatum came after dessert on a Sunday night. My father, Russell, cleared his throat in that authoritative way he has and laid out the new terms like he was reading from a corporate memo. The rent on my apartment needed to be adjusted to reflect market rates, he said. $800 per month starting next month. My mother, Phyllis, jumped in with her alternative, her voice dripping with that syrupy sweetness she uses when she's manipulating someone. Unless I wanted to help Bethany with the twins, of course. Just a few hours a day, she said. Like it was no big deal. My sister would be so grateful. And family helps family, right? Bethany's face was a mask of fake gratitude as she cooed about what a lifesaver it'd be. Her husband Fletcher sat next to her scrolling through his phone, saying nothing, contributing nothing, just existing as a useless lump while everyone else solved his problems. I did the math in my head instantly. $800 a month meant my savings plan stretched from 4 more months to 2 more years. 2 years of living under their roof, under their control, under their judgment. The babysitting option was worse. 5 days a week, 4 hours daily, they were saying, but I knew how this worked. It would start at 4 hours and creep to 6, then 8, then weekends, then overnights. My entire life would become an unpaid childcare service for my sister's kids, while she did whatever she wanted. Either way, I lost my freedom, my money, or both. They'd framed it as a generous choice, but it was a trap with 2 entrances and no exit. My father actually said it was about family values, about pulling together in hard times. My mother said they'd raised me to prioritize family over selfishness. I asked for time to think about it. My father's face tightened with irritation. What's there to think about? He wanted to know. My mother launched into a guilt trip about how they'd sacrificed so much to raise me, and this was a small thing to ask in return. Bethany added her passive-aggressive commentary about how some people are just too selfish to help their own blood. I excused myself and walked down the stairs to my basement apartment, each step feeling heavier than the last. I closed the door behind me, leaned against it, and let out a breath I'd been holding through the entire conversation. They'd finally pushed too far. They'd given me an ultimatum, but what they didn't realize was that I'd been preparing for this exact moment for months. I had options. I had resources. I had a plan, and I absolutely was not going to let them trap me into either choice. 2 days after that dinner, I came home from work early. I'd left my laptop charger in my apartment and needed it for an afternoon meeting. I parked in the driveway and headed for the side entrance that led directly to my basement stairs. That's when I heard voices filtering down from the kitchen above me. The heating vents in that old house carried sound better than an intercom system. My mother and Bethany were having coffee, and they were speaking freely, thinking they were alone. I froze on the stairs, my hand on the railing, and listened. Bethany's voice came through first, and she wasn't using her victim tone anymore. She sounded calculating, almost gleeful. She admitted that Fletcher didn't just lose money through bad investments. They were being sued by 3 investors who claimed had misrepresented properties. It was a legal nightmare, and they needed to stay with our parents for at least a year, maybe longer. My mother's response made my blood freeze. She said that's exactly why Bethany needed to stay, and why they needed my rent money. Bethany laughed, actually laughed, and said that my higher rent would help cover their grocery bills. If I chose the babysitting option instead, Bethany said, at least she'd get free childcare worth thousands of dollars a month. My mother agreed, saying either way, they came out ahead. Either they got my money, or they got my labor. Bethany called it perfect planning. They clinked their coffee mugs together like they were celebrating a brilliant business deal. I stood on those stairs feeling like I'd been punched in the stomach. This wasn't about family values or helping during hard times. This was about exploiting me to subsidize my sister's failures. That evening I went down an internet rabbit hole that confirmed my worst suspicions. I pulled up the county property records and searched my parents' address. The house had been refinanced 8 months ago. They'd taken out a home equity loan for $90,000. I sat back in my chair, staring at the screen, connecting the dots. The timing matched perfectly with when Bethany and Fletcher claimed to be investing in a big opportunity. My parents had given them money, probably most of that $90,000, and now it was gone. The bank held a lien on the house, and my parents were almost certainly behind on the payments. They were financially desperate, which explained the sudden rent increase. They needed my money to stay afloat, to keep funding Bethany's lifestyle, to avoid foreclosure, and they'd never told me about any of it. They'd just decided to squeeze me instead of making Bethany and Fletcher face consequences. I thought back through my childhood with new clarity, seeing the pattern I'd always felt but never fully named. When Bethany needed college tuition, our parents paid $30,000 without blinking. When I needed help, they handed me loan applications and told me debt builds character. Bethany's wedding cost them $15,000 for one day. I wasn't even in the wedding party. When Bethany wanted to study abroad for a semester, they found the money. When I asked for help with textbooks, they said I should get a job. My birthday had been forgotten last year because it fell in the same month as Bethany's anniversary. And apparently, you can't celebrate two things. But Bethany's half-birthday got a cake and gifts because my mother thought it would be fun. Every time there was a choice between investing in Bethany or investing in me, they chose Bethany. Every single time. And now they were doing it again. But this time they wanted me to pay for the privilege. I sat in my apartment that night, staring at my laptop screen, my secret savings account balance glowing on the monitor. $42,000. I'd been so close to my goal. I needed $55,000 for the down payment on the condo I'd been watching. A beautiful one-bedroom unit with actual sunlight and a kitchen bigger than a closet. At my current savings rate, it'd hit that number in 4 more months. With the rent increase, it would take 2 more years. With the babysitting arrangement, it would take indefinitely, because I'd have no life, no energy, no time to focus on my career or my future. The choice crystallized in my mind with perfect clarity. I wasn't playing their game. I wasn't choosing between their 2 bad options. I was choosing a third option they didn't even know existed. I was choosing myself. The next morning, I texted my coworker Sloan during my lunch break. She'd recently gotten her real estate license and was always telling people to call her if they needed help finding a place. I called her. I asked about rental apartments available immediately. 1 bedroom or studio. Something I could move into within 2 weeks. She pulled up listings while we talked, and by the end of our conversation, I had 3 options to view that evening. The best one was a studio apartment across town. Smaller than my current place but completely independent. $700 per month. Utilities not included. Available in 2 weeks. I toured it after work. It wasn't fancy. The kitchen was tiny. The bathroom needed updating. And the carpet had seen better days. But it was mine. Nobody upstairs making demands. Nobody expecting free labor. Just my own space where I made my own rules. I signed the lease that night. The next phase of my plan required documentation. I lived in a one-party consent state, which meant I could legally record conversations as long as I was part of them. I started keeping my phone's voice recorder running during family interactions. I also needed everything in writing. So I sent my parents an email asking them to confirm the new rent terms. My father replied within an hour. He wrote that rent would increase to $800 per month starting on the 1st of next month, or I could choose the babysitting arrangement as discussed. I saved that email in 3 different places. Then I started screenshotting every text message from Bethany. She'd already begun making demands, sending messages about how she needed me to watch the twins on Saturday because she needed a break. I responded carefully, asking if the babysitting was supposed to be weekdays only. She wrote back that family helps whenever needed and I shouldn't be difficult. Screenshot, saved, filed away. I created a folder on my laptop labeled Evidence of Exploitation. Inside I put the email from my father. Screenshots of Bethany's demanding texts, photos of the property records showing the home equity loan, and notes from every conversation where my parents had pressured me. I wasn't sure if I'd ever need it, but having documentation felt like armor. Then I did something that went against every instinct I had. I told my parents I'd do the babysitting option. My father looked annoyed when I told him, like he'd been counting on the money and was disappointed to lose it. My mother seemed relieved. Bethany was thrilled, immediately pulling out her phone to create a schedule. She showed me what she'd typed up. Monday through Friday, 5 in the evening until 9 at night. Plus occasional weekends as needed, she said with a smile. I agreed with a smile of my own, counting down the days until I could leave. I babysat for exactly 1 week. During those 7 days, I watched Bethany's true priorities reveal themselves in high definition. On Monday, she went to get her nails done. Tuesday was a spa appointment for a facial. Wednesday, she met friends for dinner and drinks. Thursday was shopping at the mall, and she came home with bags from expensive stores. Friday, she went to a movie. None of these activities were job interviews or work-related meetings. She wasn't trying to get back on her feet financially. She was enjoying a vacation funded by my free labor. Fletcher was equally absent. He claimed to be meeting with potential investors to restart his business, but his social media told a different story. Photos at sports bars, check-ins at golf courses, tagged at a casino 2 hours away. They were both taking advantage of the free childcare to live like they had no responsibilities. After exactly 1 week, Bethany texted me on Saturday morning. She needed me to watch the twins that afternoon. Fletcher and I need a date night, she wrote. We're struggling and need to reconnect. I agreed. Then Sunday morning, another text. Can you take them today too? We're exhausted. I said yes again, keeping track. By the end of that second week, I'd provided childcare 7 days straight. I wasn't being asked anymore. I was being told. When I gently mentioned to my mother that this was more than we'd discussed, she said I should just help Bethany through this hard time. When I brought it up to my father, he said I'd agreed to help the family and this was what helping looked like. The goalposts had moved exactly as I'd predicted. The babysitting arrangement that was supposed to be weekday evenings had become full-time. Every day, all the time. With no end in sight. The breaking point came on a Friday evening 3 weeks into this arrangement. My friend Dakota called and invited me to her birthday party that night. It was at a nice restaurant downtown. People I hadn't seen in months would be there, and I desperately wanted to go. I texted Bethany that I couldn't babysit that evening. Her response came within seconds. You're so selfish. I have plans. I wrote back asking what plans. She replied that it was none of my business. I held firm for the first time. I said I'd made a commitment to my friend and I was going. Bethany's messages escalated into full meltdown mode. She said I was abandoning her, breaking my promise, ruining her life. She called my mother. My mother called me, her voice sharp with disappointment. Cancel your plans, she said. Family comes first. I said no. My father got on the phone. Then you can start paying $800 next month, he said. I pointed out that I'd been babysitting exactly as we'd agreed. He said I'd agreed to help when needed, and tonight I was needed, so the deal was off. I went to Dakota's party anyway. When I got home that night, I had 17 missed calls and a group text thread full of messages calling me selfish, ungrateful, and heartless. The next morning, Bethany was waiting by my car in the driveway. I'd been planning to run errands, maybe grab coffee and decompress after the night before. Instead, I found my sister practically vibrating with rage next to my driver's side door. She started screaming before I even got within 10 feet. You ruined everything, she yelled. I had an important opportunity last night, and you destroyed it. I asked what opportunity. She stammered for a second, then said it was an investment meeting. I looked at her carefully. An investment meeting at 9 o'clock on a Friday night? She turned red and changed her story. It was a networking event. Her hands were shaking and her voice had that high-pitched quality it gets when she's lying. I knew she'd probably just wanted to go out with friends or meet Fletcher at a bar. Nothing important at all. She kept yelling, threatening to tell our parents that I was breaking our agreement and being a terrible sister. I said calmly that we could all sit down and discuss it. She stormed off. Sunday dinner that week felt like walking into an ambush. The tension started the moment I walked through the door. My mother had made pot roast, which was usually a comfort meal, but nobody was comfortable. My father cleared his throat as soon as we sat down and announced that we needed to discuss my failure to honor my agreement. I pulled out my phone and opened the note where I'd saved Bethany's schedule. I read it aloud. Monday through Friday, 5 to 9 in the evening. I pointed out calmly that I'd been providing childcare 7 days a week, often 10 to 12 hours on weekends. That was significantly more than the agreement. Bethany interrupted, saying she needed the help. I said the agreement was for weekday evenings only, and I'd gone above and beyond. My father said family means being flexible. I shot back that if we were being flexible about the babysitting terms, then we should be flexible about the rent too. My mother actually gasped like I'd said something obscene. The argument escalated from there. I pointed out every instance where the terms had been changed without my input. Every time I'd been expected to just accept more responsibility. Every text message where Bethany had demanded my time. My father's face was getting red. He said that wasn't how this worked. I asked why not. If they could change the rules, why couldn't I? Fletcher had been silent through most of dinner, but he suddenly spoke up. Maybe we should just hire someone, he said quietly. Bethany whipped around to face him. With what money? She snapped. The room went dead silent. The truth that everyone had been dancing around suddenly sat on the table like a bomb. They had no money. They couldn't afford childcare. They needed me to be free labor because they were broke. My father tried to recover, saying that wasn't the point. But it was the point. It was the entire point. I decided to go nuclear. I looked at my parents and said I knew about the home equity loan. My father froze with his fork halfway to his mouth. I said I knew they'd refinanced the house for $90,000. My mother's face went white. I said I knew about the loan payments they were struggling with and how they needed my rent to stay afloat. My father stood up. That's private family business, he said, his voice dangerous. I said it stopped being private when they started using my rent money to cover Bethany's expenses. My mother demanded to know how I dared to accuse them. I listed every example of unequal treatment I could remember. Bethany's paid college tuition while I drowned in student loans. Her $15,000 wedding while I wasn't even in the wedding party. She got the whole second floor of the house while I got a basement. Every birthday forgotten. Every achievement overlooked. Every time I needed help and got told to figure it out myself. They'd created this situation by favoring Bethany for decades, and now they wanted me to bail them out. My father said they helped where help was needed. I said Bethany was 30 years old and I was 24, and they were bleeding me dry to enable her. Fletcher spoke again, and this time his voice was stronger. She has a point, he said. Bethany turned on him like a snake. Excuse me? Her voice was pure venom. Fletcher said we'd been taking advantage and had been telling her this for weeks. Bethany said we're family like it was a magic word that justified everything. Fletcher said Cassidy was her sister, not her employee. It was the first crack in the united front. Fletcher admitted that Head told Bethany they needed to hire actual childcare and Shed refused because she wanted free help. My parents tried to defend Bethany, saying she was going through a hard time. But Fletcher's defection had weakened their position. The meeting ended in chaos. Bethany was crying. My mother was crying. My father was yelling. Fletcher was silent again, looking like he regretted speaking at all. I walked down to my basement apartment and closed the door. I'd burned bridges. Good. I'd been planning for this. The next 3 days were silent treatment from everyone except Fletcher. I went to work, came home, and kept to myself. On Wednesday evening, I found a notice that had been slipped under my door. It was typed on formal letterhead, probably something my father had made on his computer to look official. Rent increase to $800 per month effective immediately. First payment due in 5 days. No mention of the babysitting arrangement anymore. They'd decided to punish me financially for standing up for myself. I photographed the notice from multiple angles, saved the images to the cloud, and sent a text to the family group chat. Received the rent notice. I need to discuss this in person before making any payments. No response. I tried calling. Nobody answered. They were freezing me out while simultaneously demanding more money. It was perfect, actually. Their behavior was making my exit strategy even easier to justify. I called in sick to work on Thursday and Friday, telling my supervisor I had a family emergency that needed handling. It wasn't a lie. I rented a moving van from the hardware store. a small truck that cost $40 for the day. My friend Dakota showed up at 7 in the morning with coffee and determination. We started packing. I didn't own much furniture because most of what was in the apartment had come with it. The bed frame belonged to my parents. The dresser was from their storage. Even the small kitchen table had been theirs. What I owned was clothes, books, kitchen supplies, my laptop and desk, personal items, and memories. Everything fit into boxes faster than I'd expected. By Friday evening, the van was loaded, the apartment was empty, and I'd cleaned everything until it sparkled. I left my keys on the kitchen counter. Then I sat down and wrote a letter. I'd been composing it in my head for days, and now I let everything pour out onto paper. I explained that I was moving out immediately. I pointed out that the rent increase had been implemented without proper notice, which in our state required 30 days for month-to-month tenancies. I noted that the babysitting arrangement had been coerced with the threat of rent increase, and then the terms had been violated repeatedly when I was expected to provide care 7 days a week instead of weekday evenings. I listed every documented instance of unequal treatment, not to be cruel but to be clear. I stated that I'd paid rent through the end of the month, so I wasn't breaking any agreement. I added that I hoped Bethany's rent contribution could cover what they'd lose from me, though we all knew she wasn't paying anything. My final line was carefully chosen. I wish you all well, but I need to prioritize my own future now. I didn't sign it with love. I just signed my name, Cassidy. I left the letter on the kitchen counter upstairs where they'd find it in the morning. Saturday morning at 6, I drove the van to my new studio apartment across town. Dakota and 2 other friends, Justine and Hazel, met me there to help unload. The apartment was small, maybe half the square footage of my basement place, but it felt enormous because it was mine. No parents upstairs listening to my movements. No sister expecting free labor. No father changing the terms of agreements on a whim. Just peace and independence and the life I'd chosen. We hauled boxes up 1 flight of stairs, and by noon, everything was inside. By evening, I'd unpacked the essentials. My bed was set up, my desk was positioned by the window, my kitchen was organized. It wasn't perfect or beautiful, but it was freedom. My phone started exploding around 2 in the afternoon. My mother called 17 times. My father called 12 times. Bethany called 8 times. Text messages flooded in faster than I could read them. Where are you? Your apartment is empty. Call us immediately. This is unacceptable. How could you do this to me? Who's going to watch my kids? The messages ranged from panicked to furious to guilt-tripping. Fletcher sent a separate text that just said good for you. I responded once to the family group chat. I've moved out. The letter I left explains everything. Please don't contact me for a while. I need space. Then I muted the conversation. More calls came through over the next few hours. I declined every single one. I temporarily blocked Bethany's number because her messages were getting increasingly unhinged. I kept my parents' numbers unblocked but silenced. I wanted a record of their attempts to contact me, but I didn't want to hear them. The first week in my new apartment felt like being released from prison. I went to work each day, came home to silence, and actually relaxed. I went to the gym 3 nights that week. I met Dakota for dinner. I watched TV shows I'd been meaning to catch up on without anyone banging on my door needing something. I slept better than I had in months. Meanwhile, my phone showed dozens of missed calls and voicemails piling up. I checked the voicemails once, just to see if there was anything important. My mother's voice trembled with what she probably thought was righteous anger. You're tearing this family apart. My father sounded cold and disappointed. Extremely disappointed in your selfishness. Bethany was the most dramatic. I had to cancel plans because you abandoned us. How am I supposed to manage? Not one message acknowledged my side of things. Not one message apologized for the exploitation or the favoritism or the manipulation. Just blame, guilt, and demands that I come back and fix their problems. I deleted all the voicemails and went back to my peaceful evening. 2 weeks after moving out, I came home from work to find my mother sitting in the lobby of my apartment building. My stomach dropped when I saw her. I'd been so careful not to give them my address, but I should have known they'd find it somehow. Later I learned she'd called Sloan's real estate office claiming there was a family emergency and they'd given her the address. My mother stood up when she saw me, and her face was a mixture of hurt and determination. "We need to talk," she said. I asked how she'd found my address. She waved the question away. "I have my ways." I didn't want to cause a scene in the lobby, so I reluctantly let her come upstairs. She looked around my studio apartment with obvious disapproval. "This is what you left us for." Her tone made it clear she thought I'd made a terrible mistake. I said I left because I was being exploited. She flinched at the word. My mother sat down on my second-hand couch and launched into the speech she'd clearly prepared. "The family was struggling," she said. "Bethany was overwhelmed. They needed my help. I should come back and we could work something out." I stood by the kitchen counter with my arms crossed. I told her they needed to hire childcare. She said they couldn't afford it. I said that wasn't my problem to solve. Her face crumpled and for a moment she looked older than I'd ever seen her. She told me things were worse than I knew. The $90,000 home equity loan hadn't all gone to Bethany and Fletcher. Only $30,000 had gone to them. The other $60,000 had gone to my father's failed business investment, some startup that went bankrupt within 6 months. They were behind on the loan payments. The bank was threatening foreclosure. They needed my rent desperately. Without it, they might lose the house. I felt a twinge of sympathy. I admit it. Then I remembered every time I'd needed help and been told no. Every time Bethany got thousands of dollars while I got lectures about responsibility. I said I was sorry they were struggling, but coming back wouldn't solve their fundamental problems. My mother started crying real tears. "You're really going to let us lose our home?" The guilt trip was professional grade, perfectly calibrated to hit my weak spots. I took a deep breath. "I'm not letting anything happen," I said. "You made these choices. You chose to take out that loan. You chose to invest in a bad business. You chose to give Bethany money instead of making her stand on her own feet. You chose to favor her for my entire life. These are consequences of your decisions, not mine." My mother stood up. Her tears stopped like someone had flipped a switch. "I see," she said coldly. "You've made yourself very clear." She left without another word. 3 days later, Bethany showed up at my workplace. I was in the middle of reviewing financial statements when reception called and said my sister was in the lobby demanding to see me. I felt my face flush with embarrassment. I went down to find her pacing near the elevators, mascara smudged, hair uncombed, looking genuinely distressed. Security was watching her carefully. I took her outside before she could cause more of a scene. She grabbed my arm. "How can you do this to your own nephews? People walking by stared at us." I pulled her further from the building entrance. Bethany melted down completely. Fletcher left her. Head told her he couldn't handle the debt and the dysfunction anymore. Head taken a job in another state, packed his things, and moved away. Head filed for separation and hadn't spoken to her in a week. She was alone with the twins, living with our parents, and drowning. I felt the manipulation happening even as I felt sympathy for her situation. I suggested she hire a nanny. With what money? Fletcher's not paying child support yet. The lawyer said it would take months to get a support order. I told her to get a job. Who will watch the babies while I work? Her circular logic was designed to trap me back into being her solution. I said daycare. Like every other working parent uses. She said daycare costs more than she could make at any job she was qualified for. I suggested she get qualified for a better job then. She said I didn't understand how hard this was. I said I understood perfectly, which was why I'd removed myself from the situation. She played her final card. Family is supposed to help family. I looked at her directly. "You never treated me like family," I said. "You treated me like staff." You got everything handed to you your whole life, and you still expected me to sacrifice more. I'm done. She called me heartless and left. Later that week, Fletcher texted me asking to meet for coffee. I was curious enough to agree. We met at a cafe halfway between our locations. He looked tired and guilty. He confessed things I hadn't known. He wasn't entirely innocent in their financial disaster. Head had a gambling problem that had hidden from everyone, including Bethany. A significant portion of the money they'd lost hadn't gone to bad investments. It had gone to casinos. Had been betting on sports, playing poker, chasing losses with more losses, spiraling out of control. Bethany didn't know the full truth. He was leaving partly to get help and partly to escape before she found out the extent of his lies. I realized then that everyone in my family had been lying about something. Fletcher apologized for not speaking up when they were pressuring me, for letting me become their scapegoat when he knew it was wrong. I told him his apology didn't undo the damage. He nodded and said he knew. I never heard from him again. About a month after Id moved out, I discovered that Bethany had been running a smear campaign on social media. She'd been making vague posts about family members who abandon you when you need them most, about betrayal and selfishness, about how some people only care about themselves. My mother was sharing every single post, adding her own comments about how sad it was when children forget the values they were raised with. Extended family members I barely knew were commenting. My Aunt Marlene wrote that it was so sad when people forgot their roots. My cousin Joel added that family should stick together no matter what. None of them had any idea what the real story was. They just saw Bethany's carefully curated victimhood and believed it. My friends started asking me if I was okay. Some sent screenshots of the posts asking what was happening. I didn't respond publicly. I didn't want to get into a social media war. But the damage was done. In the eyes of my extended family, I was now the villain. 2 weeks later, I got a phone call from my Aunt Marlene. She said the family was planning a gathering and everyone wanted to see me. Something in her tone made me suspicious, but I agreed to come. I drove to her house on Sunday afternoon and walked into what was clearly an intervention. 12 family members were arranged in her living room like a jury. My parents sat front and center. Bethany sat next to them holding both twins, looking like a Madonna painting of suffering motherhood. Aunts, uncles, cousins, all looking at me with expressions ranging from disappointment to concern to anger. Aunt Marlene gestured for me to sit in the empty chair facing everyone. "We're here because we love you and you've lost your way," she said. Then they took turns. Each person listed my supposed failures. It abandoned my family. I was too proud. I was selfish. It turned my back when people needed me most. My Uncle Terence said my parents were about to lose their home and I was letting it happen. I waited until they were done. Then I asked if anyone had bothered to get my side of the story. Silence. I pulled out my phone and started showing them evidence. Screenshots of Bethany's escalating demands. The email from my father about the rent increase. The schedule showing I'd been expected to provide childcare 7 days a week, not the 5 days we'd agreed on. I explained the home equity loan, the decades of favoritism, the financial exploitation. Some family members looked uncomfortable. Others waved it away. Uncle Terence said every family has issues and that's no reason to abandon people. I asked if he'd be willing to work 40 hours a week for free. He didn't answer. Bethany started crying dramatically, saying I was making her sound like a monster when she just needed help. My father cut in sharply, saying this was about current issues, not dredging up ancient history. But it wasn't ancient history. It was a pattern that led directly to this moment. Then my cousin Clara spoke up. "I believe Cassidy," she said. The room went silent. Clara explained that she'd noticed the favoritism for years. She remembered when my college graduation was overshadowed by Bethany's engagement party. She remembered when I was excluded from the family vacation to the beach because there supposedly wasn't room in the rental house. But Bethany had been allowed to bring 2 friends. She remembered birthday after birthday where I got a card while Bethany got elaborate celebrations. Other family members shifted uncomfortably. My father's face turned red with anger. "This is about current issues," he repeated. Clara looked at him steadily. "It's all connected," she said. "You created a dynamic where one daughter was given everything and the other was expected to be grateful for scraps. Now you're shocked that Cassidy finally set boundaries." A few other cousins nodded. The intervention was splintering. Some family members started making excuses and leaving. Others stayed to argue. I thanked Clara and walked out. At least someone finally saw the truth. 2 days after the failed intervention, a legal envelope arrived at my apartment. My parents were threatening to sue me for unpaid rent. The letter claimed I'd broken lease terms and owed 4 months of back rent totaling $3,200. I actually laughed when I read it. They were so desperate they'd resorted to legal intimidation. I called my friend Bridger. Wad just passed the bar exam. He reviewed all my documentation. The emails. The texts. The notice they'd slipped under my door. The timeline of events. He said they had no case whatsoever. It'd been a month-to-month tenant with no written lease agreement. They'd tried to increase rent without proper notice. It'd paid through the end of my last month. They had nothing. Bridger drafted a response letter that was professional but firm. He pointed out all the legal deficiencies in their claim. He noted that if they pursued this further, I would countersue for harassment and possibly file complaints about their attempt to coerce me into unpaid labor. The letter went in the mail. My parents never mentioned the lawsuit again, but whatever remained of our relationship was now completely destroyed. 3 months after ID moved out, I was grabbing coffee before work when I literally bumped into Wade at the cafe. Wade was Fletcher's younger brother, and I hadn't seen him since the wedding. He looked uncomfortable when he recognized me, like he was debating whether to say something. I asked how he was doing. He hesitated, then said he needed to tell me something. We sat down at a corner table. Wade explained that he'd been helping Fletcher with paperwork for the separation and had discovered something shocking. Fletcher had a secret bank account that Bethany didn't know about. The account contained $60,000. It was money Fletcher had been hiding for years. An emergency fund had never mentioned during all their financial crisis. Wade was struggling with what to do with this information. Fletcher was his brother, but this seemed deeply wrong. Had decided to tell me because I'd been treated so unfairly through all of this. I sat there absorbing this information, my coffee growing cold in my hands. Fletcher had $60,000 sitting in a hidden account while everyone pressured me to sacrifice my life. While Bethany begged family for help, while my parents took out a home equity loan, while I was told I had to pay more rent or become a free babysitter. Head had resources the entire time. Head let everyone blame me, manipulate me, guilt me, all while he sat on a secret pile of money. Wade said he felt conflicted because Fletcher was family, but this was too much. He thought Bethany deserved to know. He thought I deserved to know. He said Fletcher had claimed the money was for starting over after the separation, but Wade thought that was just more selfishness. I thanked Wade for telling me. My mind was already racing through the implications. I spent the next 2 days agonizing over what to do with this information. Part of me wanted revenge. I could tell Bethany. Watch her world explode. Watch Fletcher finally face consequences for his lies. Part of me wanted to stay completely out of it. I'd removed myself from their dysfunction. Why wade back in? I talked to Dakota, who said I should tell Bethany because she deserved to know. I talked to Clara, who said I should stay out of it because I'd done enough. I was torn. Then I realized this wasn't about revenge or staying out of it. This was about doing what was right. Bethany had treated me terribly, but she didn't deserve to be lied to like this. She didn't deserve to have her husband hide resources while she struggled. She'd been manipulative and entitled, but Fletcher had been worse. Had been actively deceiving everyone. I decided to tell her. I texted Bethany and said we needed to talk about Fletcher. She responded immediately, probably hoping I was coming back to help her. We agreed to meet at a coffee shop the next morning. I brought the information Wade had given me, including account numbers and statements he'd printed. Bethany showed up looking exhausted and wary. I slid the papers across the table. She looked at them, confused at first, then shocked, then absolutely enraged. He had $60,000? Her voice rose loud enough that other customers looked over. While I was begging Mom and Dad for money? While he made you babysit for free? While we supposedly couldn't afford childcare? I confirmed everything. Wade had discovered it during the separation paperwork. Fletcher had been hiding it the whole time. Bethany's face cycled through disbelief, fury, grief, and back to fury. She started crying. But these weren't the manipulative tears Shed used on me. These were real, broken tears of someone whose entire reality had just shattered. For the first time in our lives, we had a real conversation. Bethany admitted Shed known she was the favorite growing up. She admitted Shed taken advantage of it. She admitted that deep down Shed resented me for being more independent and capable than she was. Our parents had made her weak by coddling her, she said, and Shed made me suffer because she was jealous. It was the most honest Shed ever been with me. I told her about every resentment it'd been carrying, every hurt, every moment of feeling invisible while she shone. We didn't hug, we didn't suddenly become close. But something shifted between us. There was understanding, maybe. Raw honesty, at least. Bethany said she needed to confront Fletcher and fight for that money in the separation. She said she needed to get a job and figure out her life. I told her I couldn't come back or resume babysitting. She said she knew and she wouldn't want me to. It wasn't forgiveness exactly, but it was something. Before we parted, Bethany asked what I thought we should do about our parents. They were still heading toward foreclosure. They still blamed me for everything. They still refused to see their role in the family dysfunction. Bethany admitted they were probably going to lose the house. The bank had sent final notices. I asked about Fletcher's $60,000. Bethany said she was going to fight for it in the separation proceedings, but it would take months and she didn't know if she'd get any of it in time to help. She said she wasn't asking me to help them financially. She said she was asking if I'd be willing to talk to them, to help them see what they'd done wrong. I told her I'd think about it. We left the coffee shop separately. Not as enemies, but not quite as sisters either. Something in between. 1 week later, I agreed to meet with my parents. Not at their house and not at my apartment. We met at Clara's house with her acting as mediator. My parents arrived looking defensive and exhausted. My father said they were there because Bethany insisted. My mother said she didn't see what they'd done wrong. I took a deep breath and laid out everything, calmly this time, with documentation, the decades of unequal treatment, the financial exploitation, the manipulation and guilt trips, the unreasonable demands. I showed them emails, text messages, timelines. I explained that Id had $42,000 saved in secret, and that Id never told them because I knew they'd expect me to use it to bail out Bethany. My parents looked genuinely shocked. "You had that much money?" My father's voice was faint. I explained I'd been saving aggressively for 2 years to buy my own place, and had kept it secret specifically because I didn't trust them not to take it from me somehow. The truth of that statement hung in the air. Clara added her perspective, pointing out the pattern of favoritism that everyone in the extended family had noticed. My mother protested that Bethany had needed more help. Clara shot back that Wed created a dependent adult in Bethany and an independent one in Cassidy, then punished Cassidy for being strong. My father sat in silence, finally processing. My mother cried, but they weren't angry tears anymore. They were tears of dawning realization. After a long silence, my father asked what I needed from them. I said acknowledgement, real acknowledgement. My mother said they acknowledged their mistakes. I said no. Specifically name them. What followed was one of the most painful conversations of my life. I made them articulate each instance of favoritism, each financial manipulation, each guilt trip, each unfair expectation. They struggled. They tried to minimize. But I held firm, and Clara backed me up. By the end, they were both crying, understanding maybe for the first time what they'd actually done. I laid out my terms for moving forward. I would not move back home. I would not provide financial support for the house. I would not be Bethany's free babysitter ever again. I would maintain my own life and my own boundaries. My parents struggled to accept this. These weren't the terms they wanted. But I told them these were the only terms I had. I said I was willing to rebuild a relationship slowly, on equal footing. Family dinners occasionally. Holiday celebrations maybe. But everything would be on equal terms where I wasn't the backup plan or the family ATM. My mother said they understood. My father said they'd respect my boundaries. I could see in their faces that it was hard for them, that they wanted to argue, but they were finally understanding they had no leverage anymore. I'd built a life without them. They needed me more than I needed them. That power dynamic shift was visible in the room. Bethany filed for separation and fought hard for her share of Fletcher's hidden $60,000. It took 4 months of legal wrangling, but she eventually got a temporary support order that gave her access to $20,000 of it. She used $3,000 to pay for 3 months of childcare up front, giving herself breathing room. Then she did something I never expected. She got a job as a receptionist at a medical clinic. It wasn't glamorous work. The pay was modest, but it was honest employment, and she showed up every day. She moved out of my parents' house and into a small 2-bedroom apartment with the twins. It was tiny and the furniture was second-hand, but it was hers. She was standing on her own feet for the first time in her life. We started meeting for coffee once a month. The relationship was still fragile, still complicated, but it was built on honesty now instead of hierarchy. She told me once that being independent was harder than she'd expected. I told her most worthwhile things were. She said it felt better than being dependent. That was real growth. My parents ended up selling their house before the foreclosure became final. They got enough from the sale to pay off the home equity loan with a little left over. They downsized to a small 2-bedroom condo in a less expensive part of town. The place was maybe a quarter of the size of their old house. Both of them got jobs for the first time in years. My father started working at a hardware store. My mother did bookkeeping for small businesses. They were in their late 50s learning to live within their means. And it was clearly humbling. They stopped asking me or Bethany to rescue them. Slowly, painfully, they were earning back trust. It wasn't perfect. There were still moments of backsliding, still times when my mother would hint that family should help more, or my father would make comments about my choices. But I held my boundaries firm, and gradually, they learned to respect them. Progress was slow, but it was real. 6 months after I moved out, I hit my savings goal. $55,000 sat in my account, and I started seriously looking at condos. I found a 1-bedroom unit in a building with good bones, newer appliances, and actual natural light. I made an offer. The seller accepted. At 25 years old, I was buying my first home entirely on my own terms with my own money that I'd protected fiercely. The closing day felt like vindication. I signed papers, got my keys, and walked into a space that was completely mine. No parents upstairs changing rules. No sister expecting free labor. No guilt trips or manipulation. Just my home that I'd earned through discipline and boundaries. I invited Dakota, Clara, Justine, and Hazel over to celebrate. We drank cheap wine and ate pizza on my empty living room floor. And it was perfect. My relationship with my family stabilized into something manageable. I saw Bethany for coffee monthly, and we talked honestly about our childhood and our healing. I had holiday dinners with my parents, usually at Clara's house as neutral ground, and kept the visits short. Some extended family members still judged me as the selfish one who abandoned the family. I stopped caring what they thought. The people who mattered, the people who'd bothered to learn the truth, they understood. I built my real family from friends who supported me unconditionally. I got promoted at work because I finally had the energy and focus to excel at my job. I was applying for senior accountant positions. I went to the gym regularly. I dated casually. I lived my life freely without the constant weight of other people's expectations crushing me. The lessons I learned through this whole experience changed me fundamentally. First, I learned that protecting your peace isn't selfish. It's necessary for survival. Family doesn't get to exploit you just because you share DNA. Real love doesn't come with ultimatums or manipulation or invoices for services rendered. The moment I chose myself wasn't the moment I became selfish. It was the moment I became free. I discovered that self-worth has to come from within, because if you base it on family approval, you'll twist yourself into shapes that aren't you. Second, I learned that financial independence creates emotional independence. That secret savings account gave me options when the pressure mounted. They couldn't control me because I didn't need their roof over my head. Every dollar I saved was a brick in the foundation of my freedom. The discipline of saving when I wanted to spend, of protecting that money when I was tempted to use it, that discipline gave me choices. Third, I learned that breaking generational cycles requires courage, and it often means being misunderstood. The patterns of favoritism and dysfunction in my family had probably been going on for generations before me. By walking away, by refusing to participate, I broke the cycle. Bethany learned from watching me. She's raising her twins differently than we were raised, teaching them about boundaries and independence. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for a dysfunctional family is refuse to enable the dysfunction anymore. You have to be willing to be seen as the bad guy. You have to be willing to be misunderstood. The truth will come out eventually, but you might have to wait for it while people believe the worst about you. Fourth, I learned that family is who shows up for you without expecting exploitation in return. Clara proved more family to me than my parents did during that time. Dakota proved more sisterly than Bethany. You can create family through choice, through loyalty, through people who see you and value you for who you are. Sitting in my condo now, surrounded by furniture I picked out and paid for myself, I think back to that dinner table ultimatum. My father's cold voice announcing the rent increase. My mother's manipulative sweetness offering the alternative. Bethany's smug face as she bounced a baby on her lap, already counting on my free labor. They thought they had me trapped between two bad options. They didn't know about the bank account, the escape plan, the strength ID built quietly, while they assumed ID always be available to use. The best revenge wasn't hurting them back or destroying their lives. The best revenge was building a life so fulfilling that their drama couldn't touch it. It was proving I didn't need their approval or their roof or their version of family to thrive. It was walking away with my head high and my savings intact and my boundaries firm. I learned that guilt is just a tool manipulators use, and you're allowed to put down tools that don't serve you. I learned that no is a complete sentence, and you don't owe anyone an explanation for protecting yourself. I learned that sometimes the most radical act of self-love is refusing to sacrifice yourself on the altar of family expectations. The phone sits quiet now. There are no demands, no guilt trips, no ultimatums, just peace. And in that peace, I finally feel like myself. Not the backup daughter. Not the free babysitter. Not the family ATM. Just Cassidy. 25 years old. Independent. And gloriously, perfectly free. So let me ask you this. Have you ever had to choose between family expectations and your own well-being? Have you ever been the one who had to set boundaries while everyone else called you selfish? Drop your story in the comments below because I'd love to hear how you handled it. If this story resonated with you or if you know someone who needs to hear it, please hit that like button and share this video with them. Subscribe to this channel if you haven't already, because I share real stories about real family dynamics and how people navigate them. Thank you so much for watching and for being part of this community. I hope wherever you are, you're choosing yourself when you need to, setting boundaries that protect your peace, and building the life you actually want instead of the life others expect from you. Take care of yourself out there, and remember that your freedom is worth fighting for.